All right, everyone. Welcome. My name is Vanessa Joseph. I'm your elected city clerk. If you're a resident of the city of North Miami, if you are not, you're always welcome to move. I'm here all day, every day. This is the second edition or the second part to a maybe two part, maybe more. It depends on everyone's engagement here. But essentially, it's a community benefits agreement workshop, which we had about a month ago, roughly, where we talked a lot about community benefits agreements, what they look like. We talked about what could be in one, the times that you would want to have one. And so this is just a part two where we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper. And the goal is to actually get you all to hopefully create a community coalition that takes this on, end up creating some community benefits agreements that can benefit the entire community. Our facilitators today are Cornell Cruz, the Executive Director of the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida, and Camilo Mejia, who is a Networks Director at Catalyst Miami. It's going to be a simple day, all right? We're doing a quick Cba refresh. We're going to talk really quickly about what we talked about last time. We're going to review some of our goals, and then we're going to get to work. Before we go into the Cba refresh, we are going to talk about a little bit of housekeeping rules. And so with that being said, I'll turn it over to one of our great residents, Cornell Cruz.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you again. My name is Cornell Cruz, Jr., Executive Director of the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida. We are a nonprofit membership organization. What we do is ensure that the financial institutions, i.e. the banks, reinvest in the community as per the regulation of Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. They are required to reinvest into the community to include low to moderate income communities. And they do this by philanthropy, social services, small businesses, advocacy, and social services. So I try to make sure they do that. We also facilitate community benefits agreements with the financial institutions to go above and beyond what they would normally do. So how many of you were here last time when we spoke? Oh, good, the majority. Outstanding. So when we talked last time, we went over community business agreements, what they are, and how they can help the community. And I was very glad that Madam Clerk decided that she wanted to have a second one so we can talk about forming a coalition and how to do actual community benefits agreement that actually has teeth. So just a quick community benefits agreement refresh. So a CBA, and that's what we will continue to refer them as. A CBA is an agreement between the community, sometimes government, and the developer, i.e. Or builder that wants to come in and do a particular project in your community. So the agreement is a legally binding agreement that ensures that the community gets things that they would prefer to see in the community, i.e. If they want jobs, or they want a training center, or they want affordable housing. There's a wide variety of asks that can be had from a community benefits agreement, and it's important that the community be involved. Thus the term community benefits agreement, right? So community has to be involved. The community actually has to monitor the agreement. Community is part of the signature block on the agreement, so that the community has a leg to stand on when something is not done. And the community also must monitor the agreement from beginning to end, not just the first year or the first 6 months. It has definitely come to my attention in working with community benefits agreements that practically every developer that does a project has money set aside for a community benefit agreement, but they don't announce it. It's up to us, right, in order to facilitate a community benefits agreement. And we just brought that up at Related, as you know, as a new project going up on 123rd, the old White House Inn. And I asked that question in that community meeting. Will there be a community benefits agreement? The gentleman from Related couldn't answer that question at that time, but that's something that we got to stay on, so that a multi-million-dollar project, and these days going into billions, that agreements are done with the community And here's what I'm going to keep emphasizing throughout this process: the community, not the mayor, not the council members, but the community or neighborhood that's being that the project is in. So they're the ones who need to be a part of these agreements and learn how to facilitate these agreements and how to build a coalition and bring the coalition together. So again, like I stated earlier, the developers set aside money. They actually do set aside money for CBAs. But if nobody says anything, nobody says, okay, we want a CBA, or the community wants to do a CBA, then nothing gets done. Or that money goes back into their pocket. And there are good and bad things to CBAs. You know what I mean? There are some things where, and please don't get me wrong, and if any of the city officials that are in here, please don't take this the wrong way. But they think about things on a linear thing. In other words, like for instance, there's one that just was created. Camilla and I were discussing up here for one of the projects down in the city of Miami Freedom Park, where the stadium's going to go. Right? You should see that CBA. I actually read it, and you can tell that the community had no input whatsoever. You know, I can tell because the things that were asked for and signed for in that CBA. One, there was no community representative on any of the legal documents, none whatsoever. Secondly, they asked for things like remediation and cleaning up sewage and things of that nature. That's what the average citizen is not going to ask for that. The average citizen is going to say, okay, what about green spaces? What about affordable housing? What about jobs? What about building some type of tech center or school, so that we can actually learn how to do the new tech jobs that are coming into existence. That's what the community is going to ask for. That's how I knew that the community had no input whatsoever, and that they weren't on the signature page at all. So, but if the community doesn't say anything, then I can blame the developers, but it's not their fault. It's because we didn't say anything. So it's important today that we talk about. We're not going to just keep rehashing what the CBA is and how to do one. We went over that, I think, since most of you were here. So today we're going to get into how to form a coalition, how to build the CBA, and how do we make that a strength of an agreement. And my partner Camilo here is going to talk about building coalitions and how bringing folks together.
Thank you, Cornell. Good evening, everyone. My name is Camilo Mejia again. I'm the Networks Director at Catalyst Miami. And Catalyst Miami is a member organization of the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida. That's how Cornell and I are working together. I'm sorry I couldn't be here last time. I got a little sick right before coming. But I'm really happy to be here, happy to be back. I used to be a resident of North Miami, and I see some friends here from way back when. And so, yes, I also had the opportunity to listen to watch the recording of the workshop when I wasn't able to be here. And, we can talk about some of the things that were discussed back then because I'm aware, and also because Cornell and I and your city's clerk, we did a lot of work leading up to the workshop, so feel free to reference the first workshop. But the goals for tonight are to discuss the mission and vision of a Community Benefits Agreement Community Coalition, to build a coalition, and to establish the framework for a CBA. Of course, this is all very ambitious. We're not going to be able to do everything tonight, but we want to walk out of here with a few things that we can build on when we come together or when the coalition eventually forms. So starting with the vision and mission, I think it's really important to start with the very basics, because when you are building a community coalition, to sit at the table with a developer or any other business leader, who's coming into a city. And to answer your question, also that the CBA could be mandated via, the code of the city, an ordinance or, some other piece of legislation, if there is some kind of subsidy. If there's no subsidy, I know your city planner talked last time about the as of right development, which is basically when the developer or the business leader comes into the city to start a project that does not require any city subsidies, monies, anything like that. That's not to say that the community cannot request a community benefits agreement, but it would not be, you won't have the leverage of the government saying, well, we're going to give you, CRA money, for instance, to help with the infrastructure costs or something like that. Or blanket permits, for alcohol licenses, or like we're going to close off the streets, so you can have walk-in space. So there are different subsidies that a city can use to entice a developer to come and invest in the community. And that's when you have most of your leverage. Again, that's not to say that you cannot request a community benefits agreement without that leverage. But oftentimes what happens, and then again, like Cornell said, we don't want to offend anyone, but this is based on our experience, working with community coalitions and CBAs. Oftentimes, you have politicians and developers and business leaders, who are involved in a particular project, who have connections to community benefit, and oftentimes those community-based organizations may not have a lot of inroads with community members, right? And so what happens when you have community representation that does not actually represent community members, then you end up, sitting your seat at the table to a developer's, handpicked community representative. So it's really important to articulate a mission and a vision, and that's basically what you're hoping to accomplish and how, right? The vision could be something like, every development that comes into the city that gets subsidies, in the amount of X or more, should have a community benefits agreement, something like that, something simple that is not very complicated for community members to understand. And then the mission would be how you want to go about it, whether it's by an ordinance or some other way. When you're able to articulate a mission and vision, this empowers you to go out into the community and then talk to different stakeholders and community leaders and whatnot and say, we're forming a community benefits agreement, community coalition. This is why, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and this is how we're going about accomplishing it, right? And so this is not where you build a community coalition, but this is where you lay the foundations, so that you know exactly what you're talking about when you're going out there and you're talking to neighbors and you're talking about, what are some of the third goal, which is establishing the framework for a community benefits agreement. Two things to keep in mind, and this is something that I think Cornell might have talked about the first time when he talked about another coalition that we're in, which is the Public Land for Public Good, which is working right now on a framework for a community benefits agreement for the city of Miami. Right, and something that your city planner also said last time was that you need a framework that allows you to, that can guide your community in terms of what are some of the things that you can request from a community benefits agreement. However, the details of that particular community benefits agreement tied to a particular project have to be specific to the needs of the neighborhood where the project is being built, right? For a community benefits agreement, and say that ordinance could be, for projects of $100,000 or more that have subsidies from the city. Now you have a framework, and you have something that's legally binding that a developer comes into the city and is getting all these subsidies, is now having to sit down with community members to talk about the details of a community benefits agreement. So you can create that framework today, but tomorrow, a developer may come into a particular part of town that has very specific needs, and you can use that framework to go after very specific asks for that particular community, whether it's a dog park or Wi-Fi or a community center or, daycare. A lot of times you may have a community benefits agreement that looks great, on paper, and you can write great op-eds about it and, use it on your campaign to get votes. But when it comes down to it, it's not effective because you may be offering jobs. And I think Miss Love talked about it. That's her name, right? Debbie Love? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Miss Love talked about a particular project where they won a community benefits agreement, and they opened up an office for community outreach, and then community members stopped coming, right? And so if you're able to create a strong community coalition that can carry this type of work, and then when you bring in developers, it's not only about local hiring, But say a particular developer is going to come in with a Macy's, right? Or, you know, or a Sears or a hotel or a dollar store, you know, and community members are not trained to work at a Macy's, you know, or to work at the front of the store, then that community benefits agreement should include funds to train people. And you do that very specifically by reaching out to the vendors, you know, that are in other parts of the county, and then have them train the people so that when the project opens and then there's a Macy's, that you already have community members who are trained for that. Also, you may need daycare because a lot of parents may be single parents and they don't have the time to go into a training. You know, you may be training people on the food industry or hotel or whatever the case may be, but if you don't have daycare, then those community members, you know, who want to get those jobs are not going to be able to get the training. Or maybe you have language barriers, you know, and you're not going to have a Madame Clerk who's going to care about that. And so if you don't have interpreters, you know, at these trainings, then how are you going to train the people who don't speak English? So going back to your question, and I'm sorry because I do get a little bit long-winded, but going back to your question, it makes sense to sit here even if, you know, there are people missing, because what we want to do is we want to walk out of here with a skeleton, you know, with a framework for a community benefits coalition, and, you know, with a broad idea of what we would like to see in a community benefits agreement ordinance.
A couple of things I also wanted to point out. One is that there are refreshments, and also Derek Cook, my favorite Derek in the city, is here. He is the interim CP&D director, so also a wonderful resource. And I also wanted to just point out that at the very bottom of our goals is to eventually get to some government change. But of course, the clerk does not vote on anything, so that really comes from the coalition that is built. So I really hope that we can get to that.
And it is up to the community to help recruit those folks in a particular neighborhood that's going to be affected. Okay, that is up. That no one can do that. Government can't do that for you. Camilla or I can't do that for you. I'm easy because I live in North Miami, but I think that that is up to the coalition. But it starts with having a coalition and building that coalition first, and then being able to go as you see different projects that affect different neighborhoods, being able to attract those folks that are in those neighborhoods, particularly low to moderate income neighborhoods, to help with a particular project. Now, one thing I'd also like to add is as we have worked on these community benefits agreements and worked with different coalitions, one of the things that we've also worked on doing is this, and that is the project itself. We want certain items for the project itself, but we also want certain things peripheral to that particular project that may help the whole city. So just because a project's on the east side of 95 does not mean that the developer cannot contribute to some things that are needed on the west side of 95 as well. So I guess what I really want to say is please don't get wrapped around the axle too much about exactly where the project is when it comes to a community benefits agreement. It can also help things that are peripheral to that are needs that need to be addressed that are in the city as well, the city or the county, depending on where we are. So, but we definitely got to start somewhere, and employing those that want to be a part of any community benefits agreement, no matter what it is, or where it is important. And that's where to start from, and that's what we're trying to get you to see here.
So, just to add one last thing to that is that the main thing to think in terms of like what a community benefits agreement should include is basically the needs of the community, right? And so maybe a particular project is in an area where the zoning does not allow for affordable housing, but maybe you can get equity from that project and then put that money into a trust fund so that you can build affordable housing elsewhere. Or maybe you want, you know, your young people to have access to higher education, so you can create a fund so that you can train young people or anyone on tech jobs, for instance, you know, or you may want to use that money elsewhere and invest it in an existing institution so that you can, you know, bring down barriers that exist, you know, and like incorporate some things that people need but that you don't have because you just don't have the resources, don't have the funds.
Also, I want to add this: that building a coalition is hard work. I can tell you that now. A coalition is not total agreement on everything. Um, a coalition is finding common ground, and in finding that common ground, being able to work from that common ground. Because when you get, anytime you get more than two people together, or even more than one person together, they're not going to agree on everything. And that's the first thing, and that's what we've seen in our travels. That's what usually that's what happens. People feel like, okay, Cornell didn't agree with Camilo, so Cornell says, no, I quit. But that's not the object of this game. The object of the game is to build things for the community or get the community invested in. So you got to do what's good for the community or good for a particular neighborhood, not just what's good for you. So I may not agree on that we should go after jobs at this time. Just an example. I may not agree on that this time, but maybe the next one we do, maybe that's the main thing that we go after. So please, I'm begging you, do not get discouraged because you don't agree on everything. Coalition is not about total agreement. It is about consensus. Okay? That's the key word, consensus. So, and the second thing I would add is this: if you're going to do this, you have to make the commitment. You have to make the commitment. Okay? Let's just be honest. Not all, but some developers count on us not following up. They count on us not monitoring. They count on us not, or just letting things go by the wayside, just like the planning director, Love, was talking about at the last one. You know, how the one in Solomeo just went away. Nobody pressed the developer anymore. Nobody monitored the situation, so it just went away. Even though it was supposed to be done for a certain amount of years, just went away. So you got to make the commitment. You got to make the commitment to monitoring. You got to make the commitment to be involved, because no one monitored it. Just like she said nobody, the community didn't push the issue anymore. It was there for about a year. Community didn't participate. The community didn't push the issue.
But also, that's also a very good question for why we're here, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you go about creating a community coalition, you have to ask yourself, who's not here? Right? And who are the people who are moving others into action? You know, who are those community leaders? Who is that person who tells you about something that's happening that you didn't know about in your community and who's saying, that's an injustice, you know, we need to take a stand, you know, and we need to oppose that. We need to go to the city and speak before the commission. Who are those leaders? Who will benefit, you know, from a community benefits agreement? You know, students, teachers, parents, small business owners, you know, how could they benefit from a particular project coming in? Do you want vendors to be brought in from the outside, or do you want people from within the community to get those contracts? So who is in the community that is not here in this space that should be here? And so when you reach out to those people, you need to have something clear that you're going to tell them, which is why I think it's really important to talk about a mission and a vision, and maybe we can do that with
Yes. So before we get into that segment, I wanted to acknowledge District 2 Councilwoman Cassandra Timothy. I think her timing is perfect because we talked about government change. Maybe we can drop a bug in her ear. And we're going to get into the portion where we'll be walking around the room, writing things on our Post-its that are on your desk, and then we'll put them on these big Post-its that I put up there. If you are not like me and do not pay attention to the steps on your watch, just let me know. I'll come and get the Post-its for you and put them up. But if you do want to get your steps in, feel free to take your Post-its and just stick them wherever the facilitators direct us to. Let's get going.
Great. And so, yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
$15 million to the developer before it even went before the Planning Commission, before it even went, even got approved on all the different, steps that they have. So, I mean, we got nothing, basically, in terms of that, because we already had lost at that point.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. So I feel like the city is working against the residents, basically.
Okay, well, I see your point, And I believe me, I know the feeling. We had this discussion about, for instance, Overtown, that a lot of the development you see in Overtown right now, especially when it first started, the citizens got up really truly upset. But you know what? They were 3 to 5 years behind the power curve already. When by the time they wanted to speak and wanted to protest and wanted to talk about what was being done, they were already 3 to 5 years behind the project. That's why what's important is building a coalition, they're having that vision and mission, and working towards making it an actual policy or regulation or what's the other word I'm looking for, or amendment that the city cannot enter into agreements without it coming to the community first. Because something like that would really, really irk me. That, okay, wait a minute, you've already gave them $15 million. Now I want to be upset. But wait, I knew nothing about what was going on prior to that. There was if there were announcements, maybe the announcements were made, but maybe the announcement was something like the Herald that nobody reads anymore.
Okay. We have another. Before we get to you, just for 1 second, I want to address what Debbie said also, and this is for everyone here in the space, and then we'll go to you. And that is this: that when you think about the lack of political will on the part of the commission or the mayor, or whatever the case may be, no offense, mayor. This is something that is basically the case for all of Miami-Dade County. We don't really have a culture of community engagement, right? And so that is something that we have to change. And so when you think about a community benefits community coalition, you have to take a step back from the particular project or the particular moment and think and envision what you would like to see in your city. You know, if the reality right now is that there isn't a whole lot of community engagement with your government, local government officials, you know, how could a vision address that? You know, how could a community coalition set out to do the work so that when developers come, when business leaders come into North Miami, they know that in order to get subsidies and work with the government of North Miami, they have to sit down with the community and they have to address community needs, right? And so I know that people have a lot of criticism, you know, like there's a lot of maybe bad blood. You know, we see this in every city because the reality is we don't have a culture of political or community engagement in Miami-Dade County. But turn that into a strength as you think about the vision and, you know, and you think about the possibilities of a community coalition and what a community coalition could set out to do. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Andre Pierre. I've been involved in this city for 25 years. I was the chair of the Chamber of Commerce. I serve on the Planning Commission. I serve on Charter Review Board. I was very involved with the project that was just mentioned. We do have an agreement with the city prior to getting that $50 million. The agreement was not a CBA as being proposed here today. The agreement was directly with the city requiring community benefits. Some of the benefits were to mixed-use development by creating workforce housing for the resident, for the police officers, teachers, firefighters, at 80% of the AMI. You don't get that too many places. Number one. Number two, there were an agreement with the city which required the developer to give at least 10%, okay, of the work and services to North Miami residents. The aspiration was 25%. So far, the developer is doing about 40% of that project is being dedicated to North Miami residents. So far, we have although it's about 360 units, there's about 150 residents of North Miami that's already registered to participate in this project. So I understand the philosophy behind CBA and the problem that we usually have, as you just mentioned, when two or more are gathered in my name, amazing things can happen. It's hard to get two or more together in my names. So what the city of North Miami has done well so far, and you got to give them a round of applause for that, is basically get into an agreement with the developer to provide for the residents of this great city. And so far, what the city clerk is trying to get us to do, which we've been fighting for, and I was very involved with the Solomia project. I'm not taking any credit, but I created that CBA that we have with Solomia. Once I was gone, they took it away. Everything went down by wayside. There's so much for this community in that project that we didn't get. So again, that project across the street, I've just pulled up the agreement. I have it here. I could show you the agreement, exactly what it says, what the community is going to get the benefits for this great city of North Miami.
Thank you. Just to address that, so we're not here to antagonize anyone, right? Just think of whatever didn't happen in the past that you would like to see happen, and just get creative on how we can bring that into a community coalition. And one thing that we're trying to do that may be a little bit different from what Mr. Pierre did is that we want community participation every step of the way, right? And that is going to be up to community members, 100%. That is not going to be up to politicians or developers or the Madame Clerk. It's going to be 100% up to community members to demand that engagement, to participate, to show up, to keep showing up, like Cornell said last time. And so that would be the difference, right? If you are in a strong community coalition that is empowered to sit down with a developer and your local officials at a table when you're discussing a community benefits agreement, then you won't find this situation because the community will have been a part of the negotiation process from the very beginning. And whatever you win and whatever you don't win, that's what you get, right? And like Cornell said, you're not always going to get everything that you want, but it's important that you stick with it and that you show up. So that is, I would say, that is the difference that we want to make here. We want to make it so that every time a developer or a business leaders come here into the city of Miami with a project that's subsidized, we want community members to be a part of the negotiating process from the beginning. And, in the end, there's going to be an agreement that's going to be signed. You should also have an agreement as a coalition. Like Cornell said, a lot of times you have people or entities, within the coalition that may get picked out to sign deals. It happens a lot with builders and, construction unions, that they may get, 10, 15% of the jobs, and then lo and behold, they're gone. Or, maybe a community organization that gets a grant for something and then they got picked out. So you have to have a strong coalition, and for that, you need to have a clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to go about accomplishing it, and you have to get those leaders here. You have to get those leaders in the room, mom and pops businesses, school PTAs, community leaders, students, all the different stakeholders and members of this community have to be a part of the conversation. Yes, go ahead.
Two questions. One, could you define the difference between this and impact fees? And second, for example, if one of the things I'd like to see is there's a street that gets flooded, isn't that something that would normally be taken care of by impact fees? So that's part one. And part two, what if the subsidy that's being granted you really don't want? Where does that fit into this?
So as far as impact fees, that'd be something that would be governmental and part of the planning department. I think that that's something that you can negotiate or try to negotiate as a CBA. Again, a negotiation doesn't mean you're going to get everything, right? The second item you asked about, you're saying if it's an item you don't want, or that the maybe the city has given that you don't want.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, so the height of White House Inn. So part of me feels like if you sit down to do a CBA, you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you the height. But if that neighbor really doesn't want the height, and you're sitting down to do a CBA, I get a little confused there. And then I also get confused if you don't do the CBA, and then they still get the subsidy, have you now shot yourself in the foot because now you're not going to get the opportunity to get something out of the project? Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. So if you don't want the project at all, you can always rally against that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you can always rally against that, or try to persuade your representatives, the mayor and your district representatives, to not vote for it. That you can always do. Again, it's a negotiation, sometimes we get things that we don't want. We may not, the folks that live over there may not want that project, but the project goes in anyway, right? But I'm a firm believer that the a no is the first step towards a yes. So if we just give up after that because we didn't get what we wanted or the project was done anyway, even though we didn't want it, that shouldn't let us stop us from doing the next project or defending or fighting for what we want at the next project or the project after that. I guess I'm trying to say is don't get discouraged because you don't, and I know it's hard. I get you. I definitely feel what you're saying. I know it's hard. Like I said, if I was on the north side of 123rd Street, especially those houses along the water, I'd be a little leery of that project. Yeah, I would. But sometimes it's a no-win situation and it's already done. Just like the young lady said, well, maybe, how are we going to fight something that's already approved? Well, at least we try to get something out of it by by trying to do a CBA. Maybe there's some things that that particular neighborhood wants. Maybe there's some things that the city as a whole may need, i.e. training centers, or maybe there's some flood zones that we would like fixed, and maybe that the city doesn't have the money in order to complete a project. Maybe they could contribute that affects everyone, i.e. flooding and things of that nature, right? But it again, and I'm going to say it over and over, it's a negotiation, and sometimes we don't win. It's just, unfortunately, that's the lay of the land, especially in Florida. I think we know who runs the state, right?
But sometimes you do win. The Beckham Stadium was going to be built in Overtown, for instance, and you had faith leaders who organized the community not to oppose it, but to have open conversations about it. And they held a number of meetings that included a lot of the people from the faith-based community. They had unions, they had community groups, they have homeowner associations, and everyone came together to discuss the Beckham Stadium, and they said, the jobs that you're offering are for 26 days out of the year, full-time. That's full-time is all day long, 26 days out of the year. The traffic that is going to bring into the city, the noise from the construction, there were just not enough perks for the community to want that, and they didn't want it. And in the end, it wasn't built in Overtown. So if you create a community coalition that's really strong and that is able to cultivate relationships with your elected officials, and that's connected to community leaders, from faith-based, community organizations, etc., then you can shut a project down.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible. It happened in Midtown as well. They wanted to put a Walmart in Midtown. The residents of Midtown on one side of North Miami Avenue, on the east side of North Miami Avenue, didn't want it. The residents on the west side of North Miami Avenue did want it because they're a low to moderate income neighborhood, right? They wanted it, but the people who had the loudest voices and formulated a coalition and fought against that Walmart were the people on the east side of North Miami Avenue, and they won. Mm-hmm. So the Walmart just went away. So you can get some wins. Mm-hmm. You can get some wins. I don't want to sound like Negative Nancy. You can get some wins,
but I think
it takes work.
There have been coalitions within North Miami that have had some wins. So I think now is a good time for us to really get into the work and to maybe start talking about the mission and the vision. Okay. Derek, I don't know if you had something you needed to say.
I'm Derek Cook. If you don't know me, I'm the Acting Director for Community Planning and Development for the City of North Miami. And just as for clarity's sake, specific to the gardens at the residence, and they were talking about the monies that they received. That was through the CRA. As you gentlemen fully know, the CRA is its own entity. It is kind of a semiotic relationship with the cities that they are in to a certain extent, but they make their own decisions, absence of the city's true input on that, on how they do it. But we do work together. So those monies that was allotted were way before that project even came to community planning and development for review. And then, as part of the review process, because this project specifically was seeking bonus units, they went into an agreement through the conditional use permit, and in that agreement process, there were certain things that they had to allot. Because they was receiving money from the CRA, they had to allot a certain amount of their residents for affordable housing. And then it could be some other elements that they include in that development to help with in its communication with the community and trying to provide some initiatives in the community that could be, but that's absent of that 15 million that goes to that infrastructure that was from the CRA, which is the Community Redevelopment Agency. Impact fees are strictly through the building department. Community development doesn't have anything to do with that at all. They are instituted through the state, and you have to have some kind of rational nexus that must exist to when you're doing your community impact fees and things like that. You can't have somebody hit with community impact fees to help something across the city. It has to be specific to that area that they're being impacted about, things that affect. So I do find this conversation quite encouraging, and I would reiterate what the two speakers are saying, that if you do community get together and you have a voice and you speak to your representatives, I believe you can get initiative done in the city that's going to benefit your specific area and the community. We in community planning are always open to hearing from the community and what they would like to have done. We can relay that to the developer. That's what we are conduit. And when we have code that can support what you're asking for, then we institute that through our agreement. We don't have code to support it, and that's when you can talk with your representative, and when they are giving out their approvals and stuff like that, they can say we can have this condition and negotiate with that developer to say, can you add this in as part of this approval process? And that's why it's important to what they're saying with these community benefit programs and agreements that you have, and getting them together and getting them writing and getting the developer to sign on to it, and you can get some things instituted in your areas for them. Okay, I've said enough.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, what we want to do now is we want to, okay, briefly, because we have to get into the let's get to work part of the agenda. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, just real quickly, on a positive note or a note of encouragement, we used to have in North Miami, we still do technically, we used to have a coalition of homeowner associations, and that homeowner association coalition many years ago blocked 2 projects that were coming into the city that the residents didn't want. So, those 2 projects, which looked like they were fast-tracked to success. Both of them were thwarted because of the fact that this coalition of homeowner associations went to work and gathered the people together to fight against them. And secondly, real quickly, I know Cornell and I talked about at a conference of developers. I asked a question, one about community benefits that he was talking about, he never did, and I said, well, why didn't you follow through with these items? And he said, because nobody asked.
So answering the question of who should be here, think about it this way, right? Homeowner associations are very powerful because they pay attention, because they have to pay taxes, and they vote. So politicians are always catering to homeowner associations because they know that that's a constituency that has power. Political power, social power, economic power, retirement homes. There's a lot of corruption going on at retirement homes, but 80 to 90% of people who live in retirement homes, they're voters, right? And so politicians do cater a lot to retirement homes. And so, think about that. Think about it in that way as well. Who has influence? Who has clout with politicians? Who has institutional power? Who has the hearts and minds of community members? Just think about those things as you think about who should be here. But right now, what we want to do, because we're getting a little bit nervous on time, is we want to take 10 minutes. Actually, we want to take 5 of those 10 minutes to talk to our neighbor and talk about what a vision for a community community benefits agreement coalition would want to accomplish. And so going back to what Debbie was saying, think about like what you don't like right now and how that would look if you liked it, how that would look, right? Think about the things. Don't think negative. Just like flip it, right? And then think about what you would like to see accomplished. Think of the vision of the perfect city. If the city of North Miami was perfect, it would look this way. How do you accomplish that with a coalition, right? And so talk to your neighbor for 5 minutes, and then for another 5 minutes, go to where Ms. Joseph is sitting, and then on a Post-it note, put your notes there of what you would like to see. You can be very ambitious or you can be very specific, but let us know a little bit about your vision, okay? So 5 minutes starting now.
And your groups can be a little bigger if you want to get into groups of 4, turn around. If you want to work independently, some people don't like group projects. That's fine too. There are Post-it notes, markers. Thank you. And we did a really rough draft of a community benefits guide. There's note pages back there if you need it.
Okay, we're gonna move on. We're at time, right? So what we want to do is we want to take a few minutes to hear from you about this process, about what are some of your impressions of the meeting in general, but more specifically about the vision and the mission, and then we're going to get into next steps. So we'll just popcorn it. Anyone who wants to go, please just raise your hand and wait for the microphone.
No, I feel super appreciative that the process is happening. I feel at the same time a little bit of desperation. Like you guys talked about the community in Overtown realizing that they were coming to the table too late. 100% sure that we are also doing this many years too late. This should have been happening, and it's not anybody's fault other than just that, a lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. I'm really happy it's happening now, and I'm not complaining at all, but, a feeling a little bit of like that desperation because there's so many cool things, even wonderful things that the city itself has proposed, whether it's, beautiful pictures of parkways or things that, you think, oh, this is already going in a great direction. But then when it really comes down to it, nobody is holding anyone accountable to make sure that we get the things that were sort of laid out there as a beautiful vision for the future.
That's what this is for. You articulated exactly what this is for.
And just kind of piggybacking on the sentiments that Sarah said, it's great to see us having this conversation. It may be a little bit too late at this point, but just to sit here and see the different perspectives that we have just here at this table, different districts being represented here. Obviously, all of us in this room are concerned about our community and want to see different things come of it. And it's a good thing that we have this platform to kind of share our ideas and hopefully have some action in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is a thriving city, so and folks want to move here. Businesses want to come, and developers definitely want to come. So we're not behind the 8 ball, and we're not behind the power curve. We have the future to deal with. So
you might look back in 20, 30 years and see a completely different city, and you might say, well, you know what? We had a say in the direction of the development of this city, and then you won't feel like it was too late 30 years ago. So. But go ahead.
And I totally want to echo that point. Right now, there are developments in the pipeline where, they've been announced, they've been approved. It's going to take 2 years for them to be built. And those are, that happened. But there's a lot more room to grow in North Miami. And there are going to be new developers and opportunities that come up a year or 2 years from now. And it's at that point, it's going to be really cool knowing that there's like a coalition or that zoning regs will change or anything to help the group get there. So I don't want anyone to feel discouraged. Because it is a forward-looking statement. We're doing stuff. We're planning for 3 years ahead right now.
Thank you.
And also one more thing on that. You're not going to win them all. You're going to come together. You're going to make demands, and you're going to win some. You're going to lose some, and that's okay. That's the nature of the game. But the important thing is that you're coming together and you're doing this now.
Absolutely. And there's so many great suggestions right at this table to make that happen. So it's all about people coming together and just doing what can be done. So yeah, we have even our director here gave us some great ideas. So it's all moving forward. It's always all for the benefit of the community, and in the end, that's all what everybody wants, for this community to thrive, but thrive in a very positive way.
And we have a few minutes. If anyone from that table would like to share some of those ideas, that would be
Sure,
great.
Isaiah probably has some.
One good idea that we had as far as the mission, we felt that while every resident lives in a different district, we all have one goal, but one good first step would be for maybe council members to host meetings like this in their communities to get everyone's ideas together, and then of course speak with their colleagues about what they talked about, and then at that point you can pretty much come up with missions and vision that you've pretty much ideas that you've gotten from your residents. So I think that's a good start, because there's a lot of people who I'm sure would want to be here today but can't make it.
Thank you. Anyone else? In terms of vision or mission, what are some of the ideas that were shared?
For me, it was communication, because I don't have a homeowner. I do have a homeowners association. I live in a townhouse, but I don't pay maintenance fee. But there's a lot of buildings in the block where I live, and it annoys me when I walk my dogs that a lot of residents have no idea that Arch Creek East has a homeowners association or that there's a council meeting. I'm like, you live in a building, your building manager should be posting in the lobby in a common area meetings that are happening, what's going on. So for me, it was for our council members to hold homeowners associations and building managers accountable to let them know what's going on in the city where the residents live.
Thank you.
So Camilo and I had also came up with a suggestion, and we came up with a suggestion for Madam Clerk, and that is to so we can get points of view from everyone that's affected, and that's to have one of these meetings on the west side of 95 as well, and then coming back together, bringing you guys all back together to actually talk about what your mission is, narrow down your mission, narrow down your vision, right? So we can go move on to next steps. One of the things that came out of the last meeting, Camilo, was that a lot of the residents, and including the staff, actually talked about having a policy or a regulation that any that's submitted to the city, that no developer or no project above a certain amount cannot go forward without a first meeting with the community. So that's something else we definitely want to work on, is putting something like that in place. So you guys and I feel the same way as I live in North Miami, that, okay, I found out about a meeting because I saw that little white poster that's posted in the yard. Madam Clerk, I think a few things have changed in the last 30, 40 years where you can actually send me a text that I can get. Since everybody has a cell phone. We keep talking about technology. Let's bring technology for everything and not just certain things, right? So I think it would be better if we had an announcement like that. And if you don't want to sign up for it, you don't have to. But have the ability to sign up like that, so we know about every project and every project meeting that's being done, that we get a text on that. And then if we don't participate, it's on us, right? But being able to participate in something like that, but also have the knowledge that it's actually going on. Because I heard throughout all three tables the same refrain. Well, we didn't know that was happening, or we didn't know that meeting was happening, or we didn't know that the related project is coming up at the next board, at the next commission meeting. Those type of things, woo. And that's a biggie. That's a big problem. So I think we got to come into the 21st century when it comes to communication with the residents as well.
And I do want to say that I believe it's Vice Mayor Desilme who's coming out with an app or some sort of initiative, a platform where there will be two-way communication between you and your district representative and maybe even the mayor. Maybe I'll be on it as well. But it's things like this that you have to force out, right, of people. It's great to have somebody who had the vision to do something like that. But for folks who, may not live in North Miami, even in the area where you live in, to demand that there be some kind of communication tool. I'll tell you, I personally don't like to use Facebook or social media. And I understand that it's important for the work that I do. I'm a public person. If you come to my office or if you call me, I'll give you whatever information that I have on hand to give you. But I may not be the one to actively post on Facebook, which is a terrible thing. But if I know that that's something that people actually need from me, then I'm going to be way more encouraged to do it. And sometimes you have to demonstrate that that's a need that you have. And that's even smaller than actually creating a whole community benefits package. That's a very small ask of your representative.
Just one other thing is when they were handing out leaflets about your project, it was very poorly done, but also it was, and I know that the developer supposedly was doing it out of the kindness of his heart, but it was just thrown into people's yards because a lot of people aren't signed up don't want to give their internet emails. I know that from my neighbors. They have different reasons from whatever countries they've been from that they do not give out their personal information like that. And they were so in a very small circumference, they were throwing out leaflets in the rain into people's yards and only in English. So, and in my neighborhood, it is very multicultural, and it only being in English was really disrespectful at the very least. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. That's very important. If I may make a request, is that when there is a communication, Madam Clerk, with community members, maybe there can be an evaluation. One, to know how we all did, right? The city and then us, of course. We always want to improve. But also, how to better communicate. If there is a way that we can reach out to community members that we're not engaging in. Like I remember when I lived in North Miami, a lot of people read Haitian Creole newspapers, for instance. They have small newspapers that people read. There's radio stations that people listen to. So yeah, social media is not the only means, to reach out to people. Churches are very active as well. So if you have any ideas, like maybe we can have an eval form so that people can let us know how we did and how we can do better and how we can bring more people into the meeting. Like Cornell said, we're going to try to do this on the west side. And then once we get that input, we're going to work together with your city's clerk to articulate a mission and vision, and then we'll come back together and workshop it. Also, know that there's going to be a video recording of this in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And I'm sure, Madam Clerk, you're going to send it out to everyone. So that's another tool that you have that you can encourage other people to watch the recording. I watched the recording, and I was very much into it. I feel like I was here. I feel like I know your director of development and your planning director because I watched the recording. So that's a great tool. And, to what Debbie was saying, it's going to be in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So spread it, spread the word. When we have a time and place and a date, you can share that information with people who were not here. They don't have to necessarily live on the west side. Hopefully we'll get more people from the west side, but anyone who wasn't here, should be here that you think that is not here and should be here. You're going to have resources. I know that for this particular meeting, we had flyers in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. I think that's wonderful. Here we have interpretation, Haitian Creole and Spanish. So we have the resources, and it's just a matter of us coming together and doing the work that we have to do.
I do think. When we lost Cagney, this city started falling apart because Cagney is where we did come together, and maybe one day we'll have a Cagney again, and I think it will be a wonderful thing. Look, you guys, community benefit agreement, it doesn't sell well. If you're looking at an email that says CBA, et cetera, nobody knows what the heck you're talking about. So I would definitely say that part of it is how the subject line is defined. How, like when you open the flyer and you look at it, then you get a concept. But I would totally sell the fact that you've got like star people that you get to sit down and talk to. And I just think that makes a huge difference in terms of being heard. So that whole concept of have your voices heard, learn more, city personnel and staff are there in order to engage with you, I think that would be something that I would definitely sell. And I do think accessibility, it's one of the topics I have up there. It is big, so there is nothing wrong with doing one on the east side and the west side, and then you take the engaged people and then we try to come back together again. So that's just some of my points of view.
Well, thank you so much. They're great suggestions, and we will definitely take that into account so we can do that. So, Madam Clerk, unless you have something else, I'll go ahead and close it out.
I do. So, quick. Claudia had brought over some announcements, some flyers from Florida Blue. Take one as you leave. And then also Councilwoman Cassandra Timothy is having her district town hall. It's the state of the district, I believe. It is tomorrow around 6 o'clock. And at the library, it will start promptly at 6. And I do want to thank you all for coming out here. This is extremely important to me because I've worked on community benefits agreements before, but I also understand its importance. And I hear you all when developments are coming and feeling as if you're left out of the process. And I think it's extremely important that everyone feels heard. And so if there's ever anything that our office can do, Roberto Dorneval works in my office. Gertie Genozier is the deputy city clerk. I am your city clerk, so you can put me to work. You can email me, text me, WhatsApp me, show up at my door, whatever it is, just feel free. We take public comments by email. So we've tried to make it extremely easy for you to have your voices heard. So never feel as if nobody is listening to you, because at the very least, you will have me to listen. And thank you so much to Camilo and Cornell who have committed themselves. They told me whatever I need, whenever I need it, they got me. So I'm not going to ask for $1 million, but what I am going to ask for is that we replicate this. And I'm really hoping that everyone here is part of the core group of a coalition. And notice that there are folks in here who may not be residents, but who are part of developments, who are part of the city. And everybody's voice is actually essential to this, because once we build these bridges, that's how we're able to actually get forward, right? Those things that are important to us. So thank you again. Obviously couldn't have done this without you. Oh, Pierre Flesh Charles, thank you for joining us. And thank you again. And I wish you all a good night. Cornell, to close out.
Yes, thank you very much. We will be coming back. Camilo and I have committed our organizations to try to help you build this CBA and build this coalition. So we're committed to doing it. So we want you to be as well. Please encourage your neighbors and friends to attend. And encourage the small businesses, even though they may not live in the city of, but their business may be here and it affects them as well. So encourage them as well.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to echo everything that Cornell and Ms. Joseph said. Thank you to Madam Clerk and all the public officials who are here, the police, and of course our interpreters, and first and foremost, all of you community members, community residents who came here. This is why we're here, and we look forward to working with you more. Thank you so much.